إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونعوذ بالله تعالى من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا إنه من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد إن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على حبيبنا نبينا المصطفى وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين إلى يوم الدين. My dear respected and beloved brothers and sisters in Islam, all praise is due to Allah, all of it. Every single ounce of praise that we can give, we give. For if all the praise was given to Allah, it would not be befitting of His glory. And so we praise Allah until He is pleased with it. Lak alhamd hatta tarda ya Rabb. We praise Allah, we seek Allah in guidance, we seek Allah in forgiveness, we seek refuge in Allah from the evils of our actions and the consequences of them and the evils of our souls. We seek Allah in guidance because whomsoever Allah guides, there is nothing and no one that can misguide them. And whomsoever Allah guides astray, there is nothing and no one that can guide them. I bear witness with every fiber in my being that there is absolutely no deity, there is nothing worthy of worship except for Allah Jalla Jalaluh. And I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is His last and final messenger. My brothers and sisters, we praise Allah for blessing us to see yet another Friday, where we put pause on our lives and nothing matters in this moment but this worship. Everything that we have left in this dunya will be there when we exit these doors, inshallah. And we pray to Allah to make our situations better than they are now, for ourselves and for all of our brothers and sisters all over the world, specifically those who are suffering occupied, suffering oppression, suffering injustice, suffering the bullying and the animosity, and experiencing Islamophobia on a different level entirely. In Palestine, in Gaza, in Rafah, in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Sudan, in Kashmir, in Kabul, in India, in Pakistan, in Ugar, in Burma, in every single pocket of the earth. Anyone who is seeing oppression or occupation or injustice, we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showers them with His mercy, Ya Rabb. Say Ameen, my brothers and sisters. We begin our Jumu'ah, inshaAllah, by reflecting, seeing as though yesterday was the day of ghouls and saints, was the day of witches and witchcraft, was the day of dressing up, of candy. It was the day of festivity for many a people all over the world, in many different countries, not just this country alone. The day of Halloween. And you see the irony about Halloween, the true irony is that the mere definition of Halloween or Halloween, the term hallow is directly translated as saints. You see, Halloween started in the 4th century. And it started because the Western Christians, they wanted to commemorate, they wanted to remember those who have died. The saints, the martyrs, the people of good, the people who believed, they wanted to honor them. And how ironic is that? When the true people who are martyred and the true people who believed and believe, face occupation and injustice and oppression every single day. Allahu Akbar. So All Hallows Tide or All Hallows Eve or All Halloween, these are the different names for this festive holiday, started in the 4th century. Unlike Christmas, Halloween has a true specific religious connotation. But it was influenced by the Gaelic and the Celtic communities to have pagan traditions instilled within the religious holiday. How so? Very simple. You see, the martyrs and the saints that they believed in order to honor them properly, they would dress like them. They would act like them. They would light candles for them. Even to this day, there are certain churches all around the world and around the country that they light candles in commemoration of the saints and the martyrs and the people who duly died. Specifically, they use this terminology. Who died duly in justice and in seeking favor with their Lord. How ironic is that? When our Prophet teaches us 1400 years ago that we are to live by these standards on a daily basis. That when someone dies, we are quick and hastily to wash them, to shroud them, and to put them into the ground. Because they suffer until this moment. And our topic today is that of the Muslim identity. Why? Because as you saw yesterday, in your spheres of influence, within your own communities, within your own neighborhoods, within your own jobs and your schools, what you see in the stores and on TV, what your children may aspire to do, similar to the other kids in these communities, to go trick-or-treating or to dress up in specific ways. We have to reinforce our Muslim ideals. We have to reinforce what it means to be a Muslim. We have to gain knowledge through so, apply the knowledge, and check ourselves constantly as to what it means to be a Muslim, my brothers and sisters. And there is a specific verse in the Quran, a very specific verse in Surah Al-Ahzab, the surah in which describes many different things. Of them is the quarrels between the wives of the Prophet and the Prophet himself. Of them is the Confederate army, Quraysh gathering troops from different tribes and marching on Medina to put an end to Muslims and Islam. And of them is one of the most eloquent and beautiful descriptions of what it means to be Muslim any and every single day, my brothers and sisters. You see, it is so specific, this ayah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He revealed it and is describing it, He did not generalize. What do we mean by this? Typically in the Quran, the language is al-Muslimun or al-Mu'minun, which encompasses both man and women. But no, in this specific ayah, He differentiates and He splits it. Inna al-Muslimina wal-Muslimat, both. Wal-Mu'minina wal-Mu'minat, both. He was very specific in separating the two. Why? Because if you look at the verses prior to this, you will see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was talking directly to the wives of the prophets. You see, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, if you look at how he was a role model for us, in just about every facet of our lives, he was the best. Politician, number one. Defense minister, number one. Art of war, number one. Giving in sadaqah, number one. Treating people justly, number one. The only thing that he could not portray for us is how to be a woman in Islam. He was a man after all, so how can he encompass this for our sisters and our mothers, our aunts and our daughters in Islam? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala set the example of this through the wives of the Prophet. And as such, because he did so, the level, the bare minimum of what the wives had to do was elevated. It was raised. The bar was raised. And in Surah Al-Ahzab, it is described in detail. In a lot of detail. But the single most important ayah to this Jumu'ah that we will be describing is the 35th ayah. And we will recite it for you, but first we have to understand that this book that sits on our shelves is our guiding light. This book, the 114 surahs that sit within this book, it is our path and our key to success. You see, a lot of us may question whether or not we should participate or partake in these festivities. Should I allow my kids to dress up or go trick-or-treating? There's no harm in that. Should I participate in my costume party at my job? Should I participate in the secret gift giving at the end of the year, or Valentine's Day, or let my kids go on an Easter egg hunt? Wallahi, the ultimate question, my brothers and sisters, is addressed directly in the Quran. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the tools by which we need to succeed, and He has told us what the reward is for performing and committing these acts of good and not performing them of bad, why are we wasting our time doing things that have not been ordained for us? Why are we wasting our time doing things that will not benefit us? Why are we wasting our time in acts of what we think are worship that have not been deemed appropriate for us? Ask yourself this question, my brothers and sisters, before you even go into the level of halal or haram. Seek this knowledge. I am not here to give fatwas. I'm here to simply remind us, is what we're doing bringing us closer to Allah and His Messenger, or moving us farther away from Him and them and our deen? Ask yourself this question. And ask yourself a second question. Is there something better than I can do to seek the pleasure of Allah than these questionable acts? Before you even ask yourself, is it a question of halal or haram, and you enter into the fiqh of what we are supposed to do and what we are not supposed to do when it comes to these other festivities and holidays. It's a very simple and precise approach, my brothers and sisters. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He describes the identity of a Muslim in this verse. Surah Al-Ahzab, the 33rd surah, in the 35th ayah. He says, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن المسلمين والمسلمات. Indeed, truly, those who submit, Muslim, the definition of a Muslim, is the one who submits to the will of Allah. So we start at the very beginning. إن المسلمين والمسلمات. It is the men who submit and the women who submit alike. وَالْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ. So number one, they submit, they are Muslim. Number two, al-mu'min is the one who believes. So the believing men and the believing women. So level one is Muslim, price of entry. We are Muslim, we submit to the will of Allah. Not only do we submit, but we believe in the submission. And he continues and he says, وَالْقَانِتِينَ وَالْقَانِتَاتِ. So we have those who submit, and those who believe, and those who are obedient, those who obey. So if you look at this hierarchy of how it's being described in this ayah, does it not apply to us to a T? It's to exactness. We submit to Allah, we believe in Allah, and we obey who? Who do we obey? Allah, His Messenger. And he continues and he says, وَالصَّادِقِينَ وَالصَّادِقَاتِ. And those who are truthful, the truthful men and the truthful women. So we submit, we believe, we obey, and we are honest, we are truthful. وَالصَّابِرِينَ وَالصَّابِرَاتِ. And those who are patient, the patient men and the patient women. So if we pause here and think just for a moment, and you look at your life, you look at what it means to be a Muslim, and you look at what it means to practice Islam on a daily basis, do we not go through this cycle? Do we not go through this cycle? When you wake up in the morning and it's time for Fajr, well, you're submitting to the will of Allah. And you believe in what Allah has ordained for you. You believe in it wholeheartedly. And you obey the commandments that were written for us. And we are honest and truthful in how we approach them. How? Well, think about it. Can't you just wake up and go pray without making wudu? Nobody's watching you. But the obedience and the truthfulness, it requires certain steps that you must take. And in taking those steps, you are literally checking off box by box. And does it not require a level of patience to do so? Think about it. Who likes to wake up at 5 in the morning to pray? It's difficult. It's a challenge. But it takes a tremendous amount of patience in order to achieve this. It takes a tremendous amount of patience to tell somebody that you do not partake in these activities and festivities. It takes a tremendous amount of patience to actually go to the store and pick up something that you want to eat and have to read all of the ingredients to make sure that you can eat it, to make sure that you can consume it. Why? Because you submit to the will of Allah, you believe, you obey, and you are honest and you are patient. Is this not our day-to-day practice, my brothers and sisters? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues and He says, وَالْخَاشِعِينَ وَالْخَاشِعَاتِ. Khushu' in this case can be described in one of two ways. You see, the direct linguistic literal translation is those who are humble, humbling ourselves, humbling men and women. If you look at the religious sense of the translation of this verse, of these two words, it is those who humble themselves in the space of their deen, in the space of their religiosity. Because it takes a certain level of humbleness to bow your head down at least 34 times a day. Does it not? To put your head down and back up and down again. So the khushu' here is humbling yourself in the eyes of your Lord. And He continues and He says, وَالْمُتَصَدِّقِينَ وَالْمُتَصَدِّقَاتِ. And the charitable men and the charitable women. This is the literal price we pay. You see, khushu' is the spiritual price we pay. The humbleness, khashi'in, is the essence of being a Muslim. But having to put your hand in your pocket and take money out of the money that you worked so hard for, proverbially speaking, right? This is what we are describing. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing as al-mutasaddiqeen wal-mutasaddiqat. And again, throughout this whole verse, it's men and women. And He continues and He says, وَالصَّائِمِينَ وَالصَّائِمَاتِ. And the fasting men and the fasting women. Tell me, of all of the worship that we do, is fasting not one of the most difficult acts of worship that we perform? And it is so blessed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not even put a reward on it. It is for Him directly, the act of fasting. So if we go back before we finish the verse, the Muslim men and women who submit, those who believe, those who obey, those who are truthful and honest, those who are patient, those who are humble and humble themselves in the eyes of the Lord, those who give in charity, and those who fast for Allah. And then the last two, my brothers and sisters, وَالْحَافِظِينَ فُرُوجَهُمْ وَالْحَافِظَاتِ. Those who guard their privates, their private parts. The identity of a Muslim is after you perform all of these good acts, you guard your chastity, you guard your private parts, and al-hafizat, and the same thing for the women, for our sisters. It is for both. How befitting a description when we exit these doors and you look around and it's like to find somebody guarding their private parts is like finding a needle in a haystack. Think about that. The identity of a Muslim, the behavior of a Muslim, what a Muslim is supposed to do regularly are described in this verse. So clearly, so distinctly. And the verse ends with وَالذَّاكِرِينَ اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا وَالذَّاكِرَاتِ, those who remember Allah. Now look at this, subhanAllah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put His remembrance, the remembering of Allah, after guarding your private parts. And if we didn't look at it as a hierarchy, if we didn't look at it as do this, which is already the tartil, which is already how we are living our lives, because the first 7, you're inside your home. And then when you exit your home, you have to maintain those and guard your privates. But what you find is, when we sin, what should we do? Remember Allah. Allahu Akbar. When we are not able to lower our gaze, the first thing we say is Astaghfirullah. So it's almost as if, indeed, in fact it is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, when you perform all of these acts, or you don't perform all of these acts, always remember Allah. Why? He tells us in the very end of the verse, he says, أَعَدَّ اللَّهُ لَهُمْ مَغْفِرَةً وَأَجْرًا عَظِيمًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prepared for you, prepared for me, prepared for us the greatest of forgiveness and the greatest of reward. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على نبي المصطفى. My brothers and sisters, wallahi, this verse describes what we should be doing, how we should be acting, what our identity is. You see, Halloween is such a joke. Why is it a joke? Because out of 365 days of the year, they have designated one day to dressing up as something that they're not, because they lack true identity, encouraging their kids to chase something that isn't good for them at all, to partake in activities that have zero meaning, and have taken all of the pagan influence and forced these ideals upon the actual Christian belief, which was changed. You think about that. The mere essence of this holiday, in contrast to what it means to be a Muslim, is something that we embody every single day. We don't need to hide behind a mask or wear a costume. Even while we face occupation and injustice and oppression and persecution, it's unnecessary for us. Why? Because the essence of being a Muslim, as described in this verse, is ever so clear. And we wear it proudly. We are unapologetically Muslim, my brothers and sisters. We are to exactness and to precision, yearning and seeking the ultimate forgiveness and success that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes in this verse. أَعَدَّ اللَّهُ لَهُمْ مَغْفِرَةً وَأَجْرًا عَظِيمًا. Allahu Akbar. My brothers and sisters, the simple steps it takes: seek knowledge, apply the knowledge, check yourself to make sure that you are applying the knowledge properly, help others, and ask yourself, is what I am doing bringing me closer to Allah, or is it pushing me farther away? And if you make a habit of asking yourself this before you commit certain acts, wallahi, it becomes so easy. It's so simple. Our deen is so simple. But when we want to complicate things, we can very simply also. Because the role of shaitan is very strong and powerful here. What is the problem of your kids celebrating and going and wearing some stuff and knocking on a door? Let me go knock on a stranger's door, have a bag for them and say, give me candy. It makes no sense. Logically, it makes no sense. Religiously, it makes no sense. It is important for us to embody the Muslim identity and through our behavior teach our kids what it means to be Muslim. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وبارك لنا فيما أعطيت. Oh Allah, we ask you to keep us true to our identity as Muslims. We ask you to keep us steadfast on our prayers. We ask you to keep us steadfast in our belief, in our honesty, in our obedience, in our fasting, in our patience. We ask you to keep us steadfast in guarding our private parts and our chastity. We ask you to keep us steadfast, Ya Allah, in remembering you and remembering you always, Ya Arhamar Rahimin. اللهم ساعد وافتح وفرج على إخواننا المستضعفين في فلسطين وفي غزة وفي لبنان وفي اليمن وفي الشيشان وفي السودان وفي أفغانستان وباكستان والهند واليوغر وبورما وفي كل مكان يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على حبيبنا نبينا المصطفى وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وأقيم الصلاة.